Okay, we are now recording. Welcome to MCom 281, 1I2. And we've taken attendance and we've done prayer. And I'm just reminding you that next Saturday, we're not meeting, but rather you have to get your speech into me. So set your room up in such a way that a camera can record you. And then when you prepared your speech and then you have given your speech, and you recorded your speech, what you do is you have to go uh, put it on YouTube. And all you have to do is Google YouTube as to the directions of how to put it on YouTube. Okay, your speech is supposed to be due to me next Friday. Anytime during Friday is fine, but get the speech into me on Friday of next week, 1 week from now. We don't meet in class during that day because, again, we would normally be doing this in class and I would be giving feedback, and it would take most of the class time with the number of students that we have to have all the speeches given during that time. And then after the speeches are given, I give feedback. Well, because we can't do it that way, what you're doing is you're recording the speech, you're sending it in to me. I watch your speech here. So make sure you send me the link and make sure you put it public so that I can get into it. Nobody else can, but just I. And uh, after I've watched it, as I'm watching it, I'll give you a short evaluation. I have a form here that I use, and I'll make some comments in regard to your first speech. And then I will take that sheet of paper, I will scan it into my computer, and then I will send that to you so that you will get a copy of the evaluation form. So next week, we're not meeting in class because you're handing in your speeches and I'm evaluating your speeches. And that takes a period of time because I have to watch the speech. And then what I do is I go back and forth watching your speech, rewatching parts of it just to understand some things in regard to what you're doing. So that speech is due on um, Friday of next week. We do not meet that Friday. Okay. And if you look at your syllabus, you will see that on the 29th of January, speech number 1, personal story, is due via YouTube. We do not meet that day. We do meet the first Friday of February, and on February 5th and 12th, and then the 19th is reading break, and then we meet on the 26th, and then on March 5 and 12, and then we get speech number 2 on the 19th, and then speech number 3 on the 2nd of April. So what happens all of February and March to your next speech is that because we meet those are 3 hours, that's 3, 6, 9, 12, that's 15 hours meeting. We go through theory, just all theory, 3 hours straight. And it's important that you even review your PowerPoints to see what I'm going to be speaking on. And then you come to class and I talk through it using those PowerPoints as I talk about public speaking. So I hope you have an understanding. If you have questions, just give me a sec here. If you have questions on the requirements or question marks about the speech that you want to ask, just email me and I'll rush back a response to you. Okay, so that is just a reminder about next week. Now today, what we're doing is we're going through this this is kind of the first official real lecture. I did a little talk last week that was short, but this week we go through a kind of an introductory and I cover a few other factors in this. And just to let you know that when you have a 3-hour course, I mean, all courses are 3 hours, but actually it's the class time per hour is only 50 minutes. You are supposed to get a 10-minute break each time. What I do, if it's okay with you, is that I save that each of those 3 10 minutes, which is a half an hour, and I usually give a few extra minutes just because because we're not live, because we're doing it this way. And actually, I was reading research and it shows that this is actually very stressful on all of us. And so I try to give a little bit of space, extra time to you. So my plan is to be done in the next 2 hours as I go through this. Also, just one more reminder before I start. I will be sending you a list of articles that you are to look up on Google. It won't take long. It's about probably a page to 2 or 3 pages that you need to read. So I'll make sure you get those and just read them. Whether you read them in the proper order or not, you know, is less important than the fact that you've read them as we go through this course. But I'll try to make sure they line up so you can see number 1, number 2, number 3, that sort of thing, and just read them. It will give you another dimension of thinking about public speaking. I normally have a textbook, but I have found by the stress and pressure my students are under related to COVID-19, related to doing the course online versus in person, that this actually helps to still give you material, but reduce some of the stress. So I'll go back to a normal classroom setting once probably the fall comes, and we'll have textbooks back then again. Now let's get started. This course is Communication 281, Public Speaking. And an important question that needs to be asked, and I'm just getting my computer running here, is what is communication? What is communication? And we all probably have different answers of what is communication. And in fact is, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to ask you either on a piece of paper, or at least think about this, but on a piece of paper, write just one thought. What is communication? Whatever that is. I'll give you one that I have. And if you want to use this one later, so be it. Communication involves words. It's true. That's part of what communication is. So on a piece of paper right now, could you just write down a word, a single word or a little short phrase? What is communication? I'm not asking you to give the whole answer or anything like that, but just one thought that helps us understand what communication is. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds to do that starting right now. 60 seconds to write down that one word, and then I'm going to call on you. So I'm going to actually go right through and I'm just going to say, what's one word or one short phrase? You don't have to expand it, just share that. Okay, so go ahead. Another 15 seconds. Okay, just one thought, a word or a phrase that comes to your mind in answering this question. What is communication? Aiden, you're here, right? What's a word or a phrase?
I found I felt like emotions was one that came to me right away.
Good. And it actually is in a unique way. Emotions are usually internal, an emotion that we experience, but it gets shown by, say, facial expressions or by hand gestures or by the movement of our eyes, surprise or like not impressed, those sort of things. So that's a good piece of what we're talking about. What is communication? Let's see. Just remembered here. The things here. Jerry.
Yeah, I think passing information.
Okay. Is that what you're saying? It's information?
Yeah.
Okay, no, it is, and that is like, in fact, one of our speeches is called the informative speech. So we use words to communicate and to inform. It's information. Okay, that's a little piece of what it is. Okay, how about Derek?
Okay. I think it's interaction. So because you giving the information to the people you communicate with, and it's also giving the feedback to you. Yeah.
Okay, no, good answer in regard to just a little piece of what answering this question is. What is communication? Thank you, Derek. Troy. Troy, I think you're here.
Yes, I think it's all about two parties or two people exchange ideas or transfer informations.
Excellent.
Like it's the process of giving, receiving, and sharing something.
Whoa,
Like
yeah, man, you might as well teach the course. You're saying some important things there.
Okay.
Excellent. It involves 2 or 3 or 4 more people, and it's giving and it's receiving information. So it very, very much involves all of that. Excellent. How about you, Tina?
You mean Tina?
I think it's a way to know each other and share opinion and thoughts.
Okay. It's a means by which we build relationships, getting to know each other.
Yeah.
Good. No, very much so. Great. Thank you for that. Okay, Tina. Mercy.
Hey, I think it's about sharing something between two people, like maybe more people, like someone gonna give you some feedback or just sending some message.
Yeah. You said some good things there. One thing that you said that really caught my attention is the word feedback. Because yeah, we the fact is, I said to you, to all of you, I would like you to give one thought about what is communication, and you responded, and then I said, that was feedback to my question. And then I give you feedback. Thank you. That's actually a good observation. Good. Thank you. Good. Nick.
I think it is exchange.
Okay. Exchange of thoughts or ideas. Is that what?
Exchange of yes, thoughts, ideas, and information.
Right. All that. Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Sherlock. Sherlock, you there? Okay. Tiana, how about you?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, is that Sherlock? Okay.
Yeah, it's Sherlock.
Go ahead, Sherlock.
Huh?
So what is communication?
I think the communication is a way to get closer with others.
Oh, very much so. We build human relationships on many factors, and one of them is a big one is communication, and it's both verbal, such as, hey, I like you or I appreciate you, and it's nonverbal, smiling at a person, looking at a person, shaking hands with a person, giving a hug. All those factors come into play regarding to what you just said, Sherlock. So good. Now, Tiana.
Oh, okay. I think communication is exchange thoughts and stimulate the inspiration. Like there's a word said, you have an apple and have a pear. After we like communicate or exchange, we have both fruits.
Okay.
Yeah. It
Good.
help you like get inspiration.
Good imagery caught there with that answer. Good one. Thank you. Sean, what is communication? What's just a single thought of communication?
One word I think is message.
Okay.
Because I think the communication is like the process of sending and receiving message through verbal or nonverbal communication.
Yeah, no, I think the word you used was something like it was like a process, and it is that, and it is.
Yeah, process or message, the process of message, process of.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, good one, Sean. Cindy.
Yeah. Communication is like the exchange information, I think.
Very much so. No, I agree with that. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Ava. How about you, Ava?
Hello.
Yeah.
So I think communication is talk with others, your opinion, and get some information from the other students and your information to give the other person. I think this is a communication. Talk with the others and give the information and opinion.
Right. You said several things there, but all rounding around to a description of important cores to what is communication. So good answers to good things that you said answering the question, what is communication? Yurin, how about you?
Okay.
Yurin? I know you're here. Yurin. Okay, I know you're here because I can see, yep, I can see your name. Okay, Tom.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Whoa, who is this, Yurin?
Yeah, I'm Iran.
Okay. What is communication?
Communication is to
Just one thought.
talk to other people.
Yeah. Talking to other people, listening to other people.
Yeah.
That's so basic, but that is so much of what communication is. It's so very foundational. Good one, good answer. Okay, Tom.
Yeah, for me, communication is improvement and exchange. Yeah, exchange ideas, technology, culture.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. It's exchanging thoughts, ideas.
Yeah, that is essential for every human.
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely it's absolutely essential because I believe that we were given the capacity to communicate, and that human communication is part and significant a part of human relationships.
Yeah.
You know, so I agree with that. It's a good comment, good observation. Good comments from all of you related to answering this important question: what is communication? I want to just shift here. You can see now the traffic lights in front of you. The colors, and on the side I've called it the colors of communication. And it doesn't matter whether it's in interpersonal relationships or whether it's giving a presentation. The fact is that we deal with all these colors in communication. What do I mean? Well, for instance, in public speaking, which this course is about, when you stand in front of an audience, they give you a green light in their mind. They're saying, go ahead, I'm listening to you. And hopefully they're mature and understand the importance of staying listening. But the fact is that there are moments when the green light can go to yellow. And yellow means caution. And when you're communicating, whether it's interpersonally or whether it is presentationally, you want the green light on the whole time, and that people are truly listening to you. But there are times when the caution light can come on, meaning they may not be listening to you. The red light means they have stopped listening to you. Yes, they may sit in front of, sit in the room where you're speaking as you're in front of them, but it doesn't mean mentally that they're listening to you at all. Maybe they have to be there. They can't just get up and walk out. And so in their mind, they begin to think about something else, not thinking about what you are actually presenting to them. And so they begin to think of something else. So when you're standing in front of an audience and you're making a presentation, I don't know about you, but the light I want on is the green light. I want people who are listening to what I am saying. And I don't want them to go to yellow, meaning something else has crossed their mind. And there are any number of reasons why that caution can happen. It can happen because the person has something else in their mind that's very pressing. The person's not feeling well, or something you said makes them start thinking about something else, or they're not interested in what you're talking about, or they don't think what you have to say is important to them. And so we need to always work as a communicator, public speaker, to try to keep the light green. It's not always easy because I can't control what you do with your mind. Now, red is more frightening because that means the people may be sitting there because they can't leave, but they're not there mentally. They're not listening to you. They have no idea what you're talking about. They're thinking about something else. Maybe you've been in a conversation with somebody and they asked you a question, but prior to their asking you the question, your mind began thinking about something else, even though you're sitting there nodding your head, looking at them, but you weren't thinking about what they were saying. It can be quite startling and embarrassing. And it's up to us to listen. But it is also up to the public speaker to do things to help the audience listen better. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the semester as we go along. I want to give you a definition on human communication, okay? And I'll talk through it. First, let me read it. Human communication is a continuous, irreversible, transactive process involving communicators who occupy different but overlapping environments and are simultaneously senders and receivers of messages, many of which are distorted by physical and psychological noise. So let me talk about this. Human communication is a continuous. Human communication is going on all the time. It's going on all the time. So listen to the double negative in my sentence here because it makes it a positive. You cannot not communicate. You cannot not communicate. What I'm saying is you are always communicating. You might say, I'm going to fold my hands. I'm just going to sit here. I don't want to listen to you. I am not paying attention. I am not communicating. Your nonverbals are communicating. Your hands crossed across your chest is defensive. The tone of my voice was, I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to listen to you. And yet you are communicating. We are always communicating. If somebody is speaking and they say something you really appreciate, you might smile. And that speaker may see the smile and think that they had just said something important to you. And hopefully that was the case. You cannot not smile. You cannot not communicate. We are always communicating. We're always communicating. So human communication is a continuous, irreversible. You cannot say something and then say, I didn't say that. Once it's said, it has been said. If you say something insulting, you can ask for forgiveness and the person can graciously give you forgiveness. But that doesn't mean what you said was not said. It means only that you dealt with it in a proper and appropriate way. And so we always have to be careful of what we say, because once it's said, it is out there, it has been said. Even on social media, it's important about what you put on social media, because it can go around the world in split seconds to different people, and you can't take it back. Now everybody who wanted to see it has it. Human communication is a continuous, irreversible, transactive process involving communicators who occupy different but overlapping environments. So it's transactive. It's speaking and listening. It's connecting with each other, building a relationship. It's giving and it's receiving, and it involves that. And it involves the communicators who are there, who occupy different but overlapping environments. Right now, I'm speaking to you. I cannot see you. I don't see your faces. But I am believing in faith that you're in the classroom and that you're paying attention to this important definition. And as I am doing this, you are occupying a certain space. You're in a room somewhere or wherever you are. And I'm sitting here in my office, in my home. And this used to be my oldest daughter's bedroom. And for many years, it's been my office at home. And so I have a complete computer set right here in front of me. I have windows looking to outside. It's blue sky today. To my right, over to my far left, is the closet with a black curtain in front of it. Behind me are some bookshelves, and you can also see some of my certificates on the wall. And then I have another bookshelf over here. Over to my left, on this wall right up here, is a clock, so I can see what time it is. And just above the computer is this big picture that I have. So I have nautical, ships and ocean pictures here. They are, this is my space. This is my environment. You have an environment. But our environments, which are in different places right now because of COVID-19, instead of sitting in the same classroom, even if we were in the same classroom, you're sitting in a spot in the classroom and I would be in a different spot in the classroom. And so I occupy a slightly different place than you, and you than me. But our environments overlap, but overlapping environments. Because of Zoom that we're using, thankfully, we've got this form of communicating that we can use that keeps us separate because of COVID-19. Hopefully soon we get the vaccine and allows us to come back together. But overlapping environments. And these people are simultaneously senders and receivers of messages. You see, you cannot not communicate. So maybe you're sitting and you're listening to a person speaking, or a person that you're having with a friend, you're having a conversation. You are still communicating. You're communicating with your eyes as you listen. You're communicating with your face. You're communicating with your body. You are non-verbally communicating as I'm communicating using verbal words. So human communication is a continuous, irreversible, transactive process involving communicators who occupy different but overlapping environments and are simultaneously senders and receivers of messages. That we are both those right now, many of which are distorted by physical and psychological noise. So sometimes the messages don't come through the way we want. They get distorted because of physical or psychological noise happening. If you're speaking to somebody and that person's not feeling well, they may not be listening to you as well as they would if they were feeling better. That's a physical reality. If a person's under great distress because of some difficulty that has entered their life just now, it's very hard for them to focus in on you, listening the way they should. And so that's psychological noise. So all these factors, you know what? Communication's hard. At very best, it's a very hard thing to do. And so we need to realize the physical and psychological noise happens all the time. Communication at the best of times is difficult to do. I want to talk about the functions of communication. Functions of communication that are met. Physical needs are met because of communication. My wife will be coming home in about 45 minutes. She won't come into the room. But when I'm finished, if she hasn't decided what we're having for supper, she cooks, I clean up. She may ask me, what would you like for supper tonight? Now, the last 2 nights, we ordered in Chinese food. We had enough for 2 nights. Oh, I enjoy Chinese food. And so when she asks that, she's talking about what a physical need. We need food. And so, that need is met. And we use communication to say that. When you go see a doctor, you don't walk into the doctor's office and he says, and how are you? And you just sit there and say nothing. If he asks you, what can I do for you? You don't just sit there and say nothing. You have a need. And so you share it. And then the doctor begins to do a physical checkup to understand what it is that you have. And if he decides you have an infection that can be dealt with by antibiotics, he gives you a prescription. You take it to the drugstore, you give it to them, and they give you the antibiotics. You begin to take them, and hopefully, if it's on target, it begins to bring healing. A physical need is met. How? You started by acknowledging, I'm not feeling well, or I have this difficulty, and you see the doctor, and the doctor tests you in whatever is necessary and gives you what is ever necessary so you can begin to move towards taking medication or whatever it is you need to begin to feel better again. Physical needs are met by communication. And that goes way beyond just a medical doctor. Another area is identity needs are met through communication. Every one of us has identity. Every single one of us comes from some form of family setting. It may not be a healthy setting. It may be a very healthy setting. But you have identity that way. Okay, and what I am doing right now, one of my Christmas gifts, I may have mentioned this, my oldest daughter and son-in-law and 3 grandchildren gave me this unique gift. Every week, I get a question sent to me about me. And in part of my answering that, I begin to express my identity. The question I'm going to be answering this time is, talk about each of your grandparents. And so when the whole year is over, and I send these in, they reformat it, and it's about a page and a half writing. They put it into a book form and they bind it, and then I can order a few more. So all my grandchildren are going to get this Christmas season later this year, and they're going to get this little book of my answering these questions. And when they read it, they're going to have a greater sense of who I am, which helps them understand who they are. Our identity needs are met that way. Interestingly, the question I have to answer next is, share about each of your grandparents. So they're my children, who I'm a grandfather to, are going to hear about their great-grandparents. Okay, my grandparents are their great-grandparents. And so that gives them even a greater sense of identity needs that are met just by doing that. So one thing I learned, and I'm very proud of, my last name is Congo, C-O-N-G-O. I am a Congo, and I am also my mom's maiden name, Conrad. And I have a real sense of identity of who I am. When I talk to my 2 daughters, my oldest daughter, I say that you are more like my mom, Conrad, and that family, and then you're like the Congos, my dad's side. My younger daughter, I say, you are more like the Congos and then Conrads. And in the midst of this, as I share the stories of our family, they begin to get a sense of identity. So communication helps that way. Then there are social needs met. Social needs are met. you know, you want to get together with your friends if you can, despite COVID-19. And you may have to do that online or in other certain ways. But we all have needs, social needs, being with people, being able to talk with people, being able to listen to people, being able to cry together, to laugh together, to play together, to inform together, to eat together, etc. We have social needs, and communication helps meet those. And we have practical needs. I already mentioned, I don't know what I'm getting for supper tonight, but by supper time in the next 4 hours, I'll be hungry and I'll be ready to eat, and we'll be able to have something to eat and I'll feel comfortable. But we all have practical needs. And so communication helps. And you know, you may need help from a neighbor, a practical need, and you use communication asking for help. I've done that before. My next door neighbor sometimes needs to borrow my ladder. Come over and say, can I borrow that tall ladder? I'll pull it down, he'll take it, and he's able to use it. And I've met a practical need. And ever so often, not often, I may have a practical need and ask if he could help me, and he will. So functions of communication, they meet needs: physical, identity, social, practical. I want to talk about communication contexts. And in talking about this, I'm going to talk about the first one is what this course is about. There's 3 contexts of which we deal with just one of them in this course. One context is public communication, and that is what this course is about. It's about being in public and communicating. It's literally one person to many. It's public speaking. It's debate, or can be theater. But really, it's one person in the moment communicating to many listeners that takes place. And that's very much what this course is about, is understanding how to put a good speech together. One of the big secrets, not the only, to a good speech is being able to have it well organized. And we'll talk about that. And when people see that you're well organized, it helps them because then they can follow where you're going in the speech. It has a performance orientation to it. You, the speaker, when you're speaking, I'm paying attention. Now, you're going to be sending your speeches in to me for this course. I'm going to watch them on YouTube. Remember this, I am watching you. Don't think it's just your words that I'm going to be paying attention to. I'm watching you. And I'm going to be evaluating you in the big picture of things. And so it's very performance oriented. It's up to you. You're the centerpiece because you're the speaker. It is a prepared message that you're giving. It's prepared. Now, I want to underline this, and in the way we're doing this course now, I haven't had this problem. But when we're in person, sometimes, like in the classroom when we're together, not you, but other students, sometimes somebody hasn't really prepared their speech well, and they think they can stand up unprepared and speak. But there's so many dynamics that go on that kind of disrupts that possibility. Just being in front of people is very different than thinking about a speech and not thinking about what it's like in front of people. And when you're in front of people, if you're not organized and prepared, it can be hard to keep your thoughts together in a proper way. So it's a prepared speech. It's a prepared message. Take that seriously. That is so important. I've had students in live, I'm not talking about doing it this way, but literally live, who came into the classroom. It was their speech time and they really were not prepared. And what they didn't understand is that I watch enough speeches that I know when they are prepared and they're not prepared. I mean, I literally had at Oregon State University. I was teaching public speaking there. I taught there for 4 years. And I had a student get up front, start speaking, and I could not figure out what he was talking about. I could not figure out where he was going in the speech. I was confused. And I started to watch him as he was giving the speech, and I began to realize that in a real sense, he had no idea where he was going, and he was not prepared, and he had no idea, excuse me, he had no idea where he was. He was not prepared. And I was trying to figure out, what are you doing? In my mind, I'm thinking, what are you doing? And then I realized what had happened. He did not prepare a speech. He got up front of us as students, and he tried to use notes from another class, from another professor, and he had not mastered this material yet. So he didn't even know what he was saying as he was saying what he was saying, and we were all confused. And the speech was supposed to be a 7 to 8 minute speech. So he had no introduction. He had the organization was based on what the professor said, but none of us understood what the world he was saying from that. And he kept talking and talking. And because he had no organization to it, he didn't know where to stop. He didn't have a conclusion. And so when I realized what he was doing, instead of stopping him, I decided, no, I'm going to just let you go ahead and figure your way out of this. This is your problem, not mine, nor your fellow students. You put yourself in this awkward situation. It's a 7 to 8 minute speech. At about 21 minutes, he finally realized he needed to stop. He should have known that before. And he said, well, I guess I better just stop. And that was his conclusion. That's not a conclusion. And we'll be looking at what introductions and conclusions are. It was not prepared. Be prepared. Not just for this class, but any setting. Don't ad lib at all if you can help it. There is very little verbal feedback. Now, there is feedback. But when you're making a presentation, nobody is going to suddenly usually put up their hand and say, hey, excuse me, I'd like to ask a question. Because it's not an informal setting. Public speaking is more formal. And so there's very little verbal feedback, but there is nonverbal feedback. Body language is telling you a lot of things as you are the speaker. Your audience is communicating back to you non-verbally. And an experienced public speaker learns to pay attention to that. So there is what we call public speaking. You know, it's really, whether it's a man or a woman behind a podium or whatever setup, and they're making a presentation. So we understand the importance of communication, public communication. The second form is called social communication. Social communication is not public speaking. Social communication is very different. I teach a course, Introduction to Communication, and we get into the whole issue of social communication because it very much involves this and more than what I'm saying today. Social communication is more one-to-many, a one-to-one, or one-to-a-few. Being with your friends, being at a party together, social communication. Sitting and talking and enjoying the company of a good friend of yours, social communication. So it's more one-to-one or one-to-a-few. There's really no performance involved. It's not like standing in front of people and presenting. By the way, I just watched an incredible presentation at the inaugural ceremony bringing in the new president of the United States. A young 22-year-old did a fabulous job. And in that, there was a performance, but that was was not a social setting. It was much more in the area of public communication. In this one, there's really not a lot of performance per se. There can be if a young man sees a young gal, a woman, and is attracted to her or she's attracted to him. And sometimes you do things to try to see if you can get their attention. So there's a little bit of performance at that level, but generally that's not what we're speaking about. It's very dynamic. Have you ever been with friends? You're talking away and you one person says something, another person, and you all laugh, and then somebody says something and somebody adds to that something and so forth. It's a very dynamic sort of setting that's taking place at that time. And you have all been a part of that. You have friends, you know what I'm talking about. You have people you know that you spend time with. It's a very different setting. So here's some settings of it, okay? Get my computer to change here. Okay, I don't know why you're, no, I really don't know what, there we are. Okay, come on. Just give me a second here while I try to get my computer there. There, small group communication. You could be in a group of 8 to 12 people sitting in a circle somewhere, and you're communicating. Small group communication is a powerful, powerful social communication factor. I'm in a small group. I'm actually the discussion leader. I'm not the leader of the group, but I lead the discussion that we have. Okay, and I've taught courses at Trinity and other places on small groups. I have literally been flown to places, and I've driven to places where I've done theory on small group communication. It's an important area. And, you know, this is a place where you come together, you get to know each other, and you begin to feel safe, and you begin to share yourself. And so small group communication is one of the settings that's really important. As I said, I've taught several courses on the campus on small group communication. It's fun. It's a great topic. I've actually been the director. I was in a church. One of my responsibilities was small group. I did it with another pastor. We had about 200 adult-wise. We had about 200 small groups for adults, at about 12 people per group. So we had, you know, probably good, whatever that is, 12 times 12, you know, 1,400, 2,400, whatever that is, a lot of people, 200, at least 200. So it'd be over 2,000 actually, people involved in our adults involved in small group work. People begin to have that sense of identity, and that's important. But we don't go into that in this, but communication sure takes place there. Interpersonal communication. These are two lips that are very close together. That's very intimate. It is a form of interpersonal relationships. Your friends and you are involved in interpersonal relationships. We all need them. That was expressed by some of you when I asked the question, helping to define communication. The fact is that we need people in our lives. We can't know everybody, but we can know somebodies. And those somebodies can be supportive of us as we're supportive of them. And what happens is you build a friendship and a bond together that's really powerful with your friends that you have. The second one, or another one, is what we call intrapersonal. Now, it's not it's not with other people, but intrapersonal communication is with yourself. It's within your own self. We have that inner voice. We talk to ourselves. I don't mean we're removing our lips necessarily, but we do speak to ourselves. We do in our thought pattern, in our mind, as we're thinking through something. And we have the intrapersonal communication that does go on. That's important. And I don't know if I have it in my outline here. I'm just taking a look for a second here at my course outline here. I'm just trying to see here. I may not have it, but I probably will still do it. where we will have a presentation and talk about the issue of self-talk, because that's what interpersonal communication is. And there are traps that we can fall into that can hurt us. And even in public speaking, it's important to understand that talk before we give a speech, because I've known people who talk themselves into having a problem by saying to themselves before they got up to speak, I'm not going to do a good job. And if you say that enough times, you're going to begin to believe, and you probably won't give as good a speech because you don't have confidence. But the intrapersonal is an important area. Another area is some reason, there we are. I'm just going to go back here. Is family communication. Family communication. You come from a family context. It may not be a family that's close. It may be a family that's very close. I taught courses on family education and family communication because they're a very important thing. The issue of understanding our origin, our family origin, is important because it gives us a sense of identity and understanding. And families create a culture, and they have a communication system that works well for them or does not work well for them. It can be either way. And so we need to understand that that's another area related to the area of social communication. Another place of social communication is organizational communication. Organization, businesses or otherwise, have for themselves an organized system of communicating. Who's in charge? Who's second in charge? Who is not in charge? And so organizational communication is critical, and being able to communicate well is important. Do you know that there's some research that suggests that supervisors at the higher level will spend up to 70 to 75% of their time communicating? It's very possible for me to say something and you not to understand what I said. It's very possible for me to whisper into the ear of another person a message and say, now tell somebody else. And then that person tells somebody else and that somebody else. And eventually everybody's heard it from somebody. But by the time the last person hears it, the message is often changed. And so it's so important for us to realize that in organizations, it can be problematic. It can be problematic making sure that people understand what has been said. I literally have had classes where I've been teaching, and I have said, the syllabus makes it clear that this is due on this date. And I'll go away from the class and I'll go to my office, and on my computer will be a message question from the students. I'm sorry, when will that exam be? Or when will this be due? When I just went over it very thoroughly in class. And then I sit there and start banging my head against the wall. Like, how could they not get that? Communication's tough. The bigger the organization, the more likelihood that there's going to be miscommunication taking place. And so you have to really work hard at making sure you communicate well. So that's the second area. And there's more to what I just described in regard to the issue of social communication, a lot more. Now there's mediated communication. A mediated communication sometimes connects with social communication. In fact, sometimes we use media in social communication settings. It's interesting how they connect. But mediated communication, it's one-to-one and yet one-to-many via a medium. For instance, if you watch the news on TV at night, let's just say you sit down and watch it. You're in a room, maybe by yourself or a couple other people, and there's a person on the TV screen and they're sharing about the most recent storm or the most recent weather likelihood or the most recent sports story or whatever it is. And they're sharing. And they're in a room where there's a camera person and a technical person, and then there might be the news anchored person and another news person, and then a sports person, and then a weather person, and they all have their moments. And when they each speak, that's how few people are actually in the room. But they're speaking into a camera, and they could be speaking to thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of people at one time, just via the medium of the mediator. I'm trying to get my mouse here. There. Settings, radio, TV, film, video, Facebook, internet, Twitter, on and on and on the list goes. But this course, of course, is not about that. Not about mass communication, but those are big areas and important areas. And so that's just give you this, when we talk about what is communication, I'm trying to give you a bit of an orientation. I'm going to give you a bit more here to understand what is communication. So let's talk about two major models of communication. The first one is the linear model. Now, in the word linear is the first four letters which spell the word line, L-I-N-E. That's very much what a linear model is. It's a line. It starts somewhere and it goes somewhere. I have no idea why my computer does not want to give this to me so fast. It's one-way communication. It's one-way communication. You have a person who sends a message to somebody and it stops there. It's one way. Somebody takes it in, somebody gives it. It starts with the sender, it ends with the receiver. Those two are important aspects of communication, the sender and the receiver, and how that interaction works. Here's some features. It is sender-centered. Like I said, when you are speaking, it's up to you. It's totally dependent on you and your speech. Not just in this class, I'm talking about anywhere. Maybe one day you will be asked to do a short speech, giving a toast to a groom of a wedding or a bride in a wedding. That's just an example. Or maybe you'll be asked to go to a funeral. It might be a relative, and to share some positive things about that person. It's up to you. And whatever the setting is, it's up to you to have done your homework, to have done your work, and to present well. It is centered on you. You are the sender. You must do your homework. It is one way and it is one time. It's one way and it's one time. It's like right now, this is what's happening. I am lecturing right now on purpose. You're going to be giving speeches later, etc. So it's one way, it's one time. So when you're standing in front of an audience and you speak, once you've said it, it's been said. You don't say it again to the same audience in the same moment. It's one way from you, the sender, to the receiver, and it's one time. It impacts all the listeners equally. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody will think the same thing. It doesn't mean everybody will remember the same thing. It doesn't mean everybody will do the same thing or apply it a certain thing, what you say, the same way. But at the time of you speaking, and if everybody's listening, it impacts them equally in the sense that they're in the room, they heard the words, they have opportunity to think about it. What they do with it, what you say, is their choice, not yours. Here's a graphic of what I'm describing, okay? You have one-way communication. You have the two arrows going in the same direction. And you have a sender who chooses to send a message, whatever that is. And in public speaking, the sender is doing an important job. And they have a message that they want to give out. Whatever that message is, this is important. And I want you to understand this. And they have a channel by which they use. We're using Zoom. We're using my PowerPoints right now. And we're communicating this way. This is the channel that's being used right now. And then you have the receiver. So if I say to you as the teacher, I'm the sender, this will be on a midterm exam. We don't have a midterm exam in this course, so don't worry. We do, but we don't because of COVID-19. I'm not doing any exams that way. Midterm exams. We do have a final exam. And you, the sender, you send the message, whatever that is, and you have a channel to do it. Live, Zoom, radio, telephone, television, tweet, whatever. You're the sender, you have a message, you have a channel, and there is a receiver who gets that message. This goes on all the time. It's one way. By the way, when I say it's one way, it is, but there's an element of two-way, and that's the nonverbal language that happens. Now, there's some other things to this model, but I didn't put it on this model. I'm going to put it on the next one so that I don't have to repeat myself twice. So you have the linear, but then you also have the interactive or the circular model of communication. You can tell by those words that this is radically different from the linear. People pay attention to what the other is saying and they respond accordingly. If you and I were talking and I were to say to you, how was your day? I would expect you to give a response, and your response could be, I had a terrible day. I had a great day. I had an so-so day, whatever it happens to be. My asking you a question has basically almost ensured that there will be a response to the question that will be given. The sender stimulates a response from the receiver. There needs to be feedback. How are you doing? I expect you to respond to that, not just be silent. How are you doing? You must have some form of feedback in this one. Okay? It's interaction centered. Again, like I said earlier, it's dynamic. Friends getting together, they're laughing and they're talking and they're listening and then they're talking and then they're listening and then they're laughing and whatever else. It's all dynamic in the process of what's going on. And very, very important. Okay. So let's look at the model of this. It's another way to say this, it's two-way communication. Now, two-way meaning not it's between at least two, could be between 2, 3, 4, as many people, but not just by yourself. Okay, but with other people. And they respond back. So it's transactional. There's something that I get to give to you, but there's something in response that you give back to me. It's a giving and receiving back and forth. It's two-way. It's transactional. Okay. So here's a model of it. We have a sender, and the sender is sending a message to the receiver. But then the receiver becomes the sender and sends back a message in response to the original sender, who's a receiver. So this is what it looks like. The sender in the gray has a message and a channel. And whatever that message is or question, and sends that message. And the original receiver takes in, he or she receives the message, or they receive the message. And then they have a response. And when they respond, they become the sender. The original sender becomes the receiver. And they respond with a message through a channel. So what am I describing here? I am describing a conversation. We do this all the time. It's part of being informed. It's part of the process of building relationships. And now in public speaking, we don't have this part. We have just the sender and the receiver with the message through a channel. But at all times, there are things that are common to both. And here are the things that are common. First of all, there's an environment, whether it's one-way communication or two-way. There's always an environment. It's very important. You've been involved. You know what I'm talking about. There are environments that are kind of like having a party together. You're laughing. You're just enjoying being with each other. You love the environment. It's fantastic. It's what you want it to be. It's great. Other environments are hostile, and it's frightening. And in public speaking, you might enter into a hostile environment where the people don't like what you stand for. I've been there. I literally, on the Trinity Western University campus, the main campus in Langley, made a presentation to a room packed with people in the Northwest building. They have this auditorium that slopes downward. And it was estimated that 2/3 to 3/4 of the audience were hostile towards me in my presentation before I started. And in light of that, I needed to have done audience analysis, which we'll get into, to understand what I was up against. And before I was finished my introduction, I had everybody absolutely quiet, and I had people pulling out Kleenexes and this is almost all women, and wiping their eyes. And I'll talk about that later when we get into how to do an introduction. I've been in an environment where I spoke at a place that fed people who were down and out. What I mean is people who lived on the streets, and they'd come to this place to get a meal. And to get into the meal, they had to go through a little service, where there was a talk, and I was asked to come and do a talk. I did not know what my audience was like, and I should have asked questions. And I found out like over half of them were drunk. They were there to get into the room. They were there so they could get in and get supper. So they had to sit there. I had one man literally in the front row. He was quite drunk. He just slid off his chair, slow motion onto the floor, put his head, his arms under his head, and he fell asleep and snored. So that really doesn't say much for my speaking. It was a tough environment. The audience didn't care what I said, or few did. So I've had a happy environment. I've had a hostile environment. I had a exhausted sort of people not really wanting to be there for me, but for the food environment. And then I had another environment. I was speaking in this small city just inside the United States, not very far from here. It was a church, and a friend of mine was the pastor of that church, and he and his family were visiting us up here in this house here. And I went down to his church on Sundays and spoke. He was on vacation, so he didn't go. and I spoke. And the first Sunday I spoke there, I won't give the story now, but literally somebody from the occult came to visit to upset the service, to upset me, to disturb the situation. That created a real environment when I finally realized who was sitting in the room there. It was a very frightening thing. I mean, she literally had a black hat on. She pulled a veil over her eyes. And then she stood up at the end of the bench, staring at me as I was speaking. And then she moved, and I didn't see where she moved. And then I found her. She was at the very back of the auditorium, and she was standing there, just staring at me with this black veil over her eyes. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you can see me, all of a sudden she did this to me as I was speaking. That was very eerie. That was an environment in public speaking I had to deal with. Another dynamic that's in both one-way and two-way communication is the issue of this dynamic called encoding and decoding. This is all about words. You know that when we're born, we don't have words, verbal words. We don't come out saying, "Hi, mommy, I'm hungry." We are not there at that stage of development. We're just brand new born. And how interesting it is that a year later, when you visit that baby that was just born, and they're crawling, and if they're early, they may be walking. Usually it's a little bit more than 12 months, can be 12 months. And they have some words like mama or whatever language yours is in, but for mother, mummy, or mum, or dada, or daddy, one of those words or something. And then they have other words. Where do they get that from? Well, we have this incredible computer called the brain, and we sit in an environment of life, and people are talking using words, and we're looking at them, and after a while we begin to realize that if I say mummy, that woman responds to me, or dada or daddy, that man responds to me. And it goes that word, that noise, that's a word. We encode it, we put it in our brain. So after a while, if somebody says, "Where's your daddy?" and the little child just points to where her daddy or his daddy is, or mummy, or sister. And after a period of time, we keep adding words. More words get added to our brain. And that's encoding. It's taking an understanding that when I use a word, it has an image in my mind. Like if I say the word ship, as in a boat, in your mind, you have a picture of what that is. It's encoded in your brain. And we create this image of what it is. And when a person says a group of words together, we're able to take each of those words and put meaning to the sentence. When we do that, that's decoding. So encoding is putting into our minds the words. Decoding is hearing the words and putting meaning to a group of words when spoken. If I say to you that it is really raining outside, horribly hard rain, in your mind, you're able to put those together and say horrible. That means it's really serious storm. It's wet, it's pouring. Better make sure I put my raincoat on before going out. We are able to decode the meaning. Today, of course, it's the opposite. It's pleasant outside. But we decode it. You're doing that right now as I'm speaking. And many, if not all of you, English is not your first language. And I admire students that come from another country and learn another language. And you have maybe your mother tongue language, and now you've got English as your second language or third language. Or you may have grown up here in Canada and it's your first language. I'm not sure your situation. But what we do with words is we encode them in our brain. And then when we hear them, as we grow up, we hear them we're able to decode and put meaning to that. And that happens early. My daughter and son-in-law have 3 children. We watched this happen. They taught them sign language also. And they learned using words, how to put them together to understand what their parents were asking them. And one of the things the parents would say, are you full? Have you eaten enough? And at first the students were taught, grandchildren were taught like this signal, meaning more, and other words. And then they began to be able to say that. They could ask for more food, or I've had enough. And so we encode, and when we're asked or people talk to us, we take those words and we decode to put meaning to it. So we put meaning to each word. Then when somebody uses all those words, we begin to decode to understand the message. Another factor involved in transactional two-way or communication, one-way communication, if you're speaking, is the issue of noise. The fact is that noise is a reality of life. We have physical noise and we have psychological noise. And in public speaking, you need to be aware of this issue of noise. You have to always be aware that there's noise happening. It can be white noise, the hum of lights. It can be the noise of chatter, people talking even when you're speaking. It can be noise of people moving around. It can be the noise of people getting up, going to the washroom while you're speaking, come back, sit down. There's all sorts of physical noise that takes place in any speech at any time. But there's also psychological noise. There's the reality that we live in a setting with different stressors. And one of the great noises that we're dealing with today, of course, is COVID-19. And it quietly impacts us. As I said, I think I shared with you that the University of Victoria did a research on their staff and faculty asking key questions and got incredibly good information. And they began to realize there's a lot of noise in the educational setting taking place because people are under stress. And so we need just to be aware of those noise factors and how that definitely impacts us in regard to our capacity to communicate. So be aware that the issue of environment, the issue of encoding and decoding, and then the issue of noise are factors in the transactional two-way communication model, but equally are involved in one-way communication. And because this is a course on one-way communication, you need to be aware at all times of the environments, of the issues of words and encoding and decoding of them, the issue of noise. You need to be aware that you are the sender and that those who are sitting in front of you are the receiver, and that you are to give a message, you are to find that channel, and you need to do other important things that we get into in this class to make a speech effective. It's not just a matter of standing up and talking. There's so much more involved in this. And so we need to be aware of that. Now, at the same time, there's some things that are dynamics going on in two-way communication that actually can be and are in different ways in one-way communication. One of them is the issue of it being simultaneously sending and receiving. So at the same time, in one-way and two-way communication, we're sending and we're receiving. In one-way communication, which this course is about, it's very important to understand that you're the public speaker when it's your turn to speak. You're the sender, you are sending, and the audience listening to you are the receiver, they're to be receiving. However, what you always need to pay attention to, and you become aware of it when you stand in front of an audience, is that your audience is actually sending you a nonverbal message, and it impacts you. And so there is sending and receiving even in one-way communication. For instance, Here you are standing up front and you're speaking to a group of people, and somebody sitting in the front row, as you're speaking away, all of a sudden does this. That's nonverbal communication. They may not have meant this, but guess what? It almost is saying to you, you are boring. When really what they're maybe really saying is, I am tired. So when you're tired and you're listening to somebody, cover up the yawn. Don't let people see that. It can be quite disruptive and can be quite discouraging to the speaker. So always be aware that in two-way communication, we're senders and we're receivers, and we do it verbally. In one-way communication, if we're speaking, we're the sender. But as we're sending a message out there, the people receiving our message, they're not just watching or listening to our words, they're watching our person, but at the same time, they're also receiving the message and they're sending a nonverbal message back to us. If people lean into the chair as you're speaking, that says you have caught their attention. They're really listening. If they sit back slouched in their chair with their feet, hands folded, that may say to them, they are defensive or they're not interested in what you have to say. And so we need to realize that they're sending us messages too. I remember the first time I spoke at our home church in Calgary, and I took my undergraduate studies out here in the West Coast. And I went back, I'd taken a course in what is called homiletics, which is preaching, public speaking. And so the church thought, well, you're been taking classes, let's give you a Sunday to speak. So I'm up front, and it's a pretty wide church, and with a couple aisles and then benches, middle benches, side benches, aisle, and then aisle, outside aisles. And so, as I'm speaking, sitting in the front row over on this side over here in the front row are Al and Doris. Now, Al and Doris worked with the youth in the church. And I, back years ago, used to be a teenager and go to the youth group, and they were there. They didn't like me. And I kind of gave them some good reason for not liking me. So they are sitting there. Remember, I am one-way communicating to everybody, and they're sitting in the front row, and Doris was a very militant sort of person, very strong, and she sat there like this as I was speaking the whole time. And that's intimidating. Al, he slouched in his chair, so his bum was barely on the seat, his legs out, bracing him, his hands kind of folded quietly, his glasses, I don't even have my glasses on, but his glasses were kind of like this. And he's kind of looking at me over the top of the eyes. The whole time they were doing that, the only word that came to my mind was loser. I think that's how they saw me, loser. Were they communicating? Yes. Was I receiving it? Yes. So you need to understand in both one-way and two-way communication, simultaneously sending and receiving is definitely taking place, either with words or with body language or tone of voice. Those are the three major components. We'll talk about that in another day. You need to understand that in transactional communication and in one-way communication, it's more fluid than it is static. It's very dynamic. It's certainly dynamic in two-way communication. Person speaks, another person's listening, and that person speaks, the other person or persons are listening, and you go back and forth. There's chatter, there's laughter, there's seriousness, there might be arguments or whatever it is. It's very fluid going back and forth. In one-way communication, it is also fluid. It's not static in that as you're speaking, people are non-verbally responding to you. If they move in, it means give me more, give me more. If they move back in defensive, it's like, hurry up and finish, please. But it's not static. because it's with human beings. Communication foundationally is all about communication, is all about human beings expressing themselves and being understood. Another factor important is it's relational, not individual. In two-way communication, there's a relationship going on there. It could be a healthy relationship, it could be an unhealthy relationship, but it's very relational. We look into the eyes of the other person. We express ourselves openly and with clarity, wanting to be understood. It's not about one person who says, you just be quiet while I tell you my position, although that can happen. See, even in public speaking, you might say, well, wait a minute, it's one person speaking and everybody's listening. No, everybody's not just being quiet. Nonverbal communication equally, in fact, more than equally, is powerful in communicating a message. And so it involves an individual who may be speaking, but it involves a lot of people who are listening and who are communicating nonverbally. And so we need to think about the relational side of things. I'll say this again and again and again. In public speaking, one thing to always remember, it's not about you, the speaker, it is about your audience. You're there because of them, you want to help them. They should be there wanting to be helped, but also wanting to be supportive of you, making it relational. Okay, I wanted to talk about factors important to both the linear and the circular model. You already have some of this down. One is noise, and noise takes place in the mind and outside the mind. It takes place in the room. It takes place within. I've been in situations where I was listening to a speaker and the noise was really sometimes hard to handle. It was frustrating. There were some people with a crying baby and just for some reason didn't seem to understand that maybe they should walk out of the room with the crying baby because it was disturbing the capacity to listen. And under my breath, I would say, take the baby out. Noise. There's also noise of people literally getting up, literally walking in front of the speaker, going out the door to go to the washroom and coming back in. A year and a half ago in Richmond, in one of the classrooms, there's only one door in and out of that room. A gal was giving her speech, standing up front, giving her speech, and a student got up in the middle of the speech, got up and walked up the front, then across, right in front of her, walked over to the door and went out. How inappropriate. That's disruptive. That was noise, because all of us were kind of watching him walk out. That's a form of noise, not appreciated. We need to realize that in the linear and the circular model, noise does take a place, as I've said before, whether it be physical noise or whether it be emotional noise. That is something that we must always be aware of that's happening all the time. A second is context. There's always a context by which a speech is given. There's always a context by which you're in two-way communication. Two-way communication could be at a party. It could be after a unique event where you're all sitting and talking. Context of one-way communication could be a presentation. And so we need to realize that there's always a context. And that context can be, as I said, can be receptive. I spoke at a teacher's celebration, celebrating the teachers of the organization. I was the keynote speaker. I didn't belong to this particular organization, but they were there to have a good time. There was lots of laughter as people were eating the meal, and I became very much aware of that. And I really was enjoying it because they were in good spirit. The context was celebration. And so I got up front and I shared a funny story. I didn't think it was the world's funniest story. And the people both fell off their chairs laughing. The context was celebration. They just so enjoyed themselves. I've been in a context where I had to I had to be the speaker at a funeral. Very different context, radically different. And even in that, I've had different types of funerals. I mean, I gave one where my first ever funeral was a man who was just wonderful. Everybody loved him. The room was filled. The auditorium was filled with people who had so much experience doing pastoral work. It was well over, with all the people who were there, there was well over 1,000 years of experience in pastoral work. And here I was, my first ever funeral that I led. That's a context. The very next funeral that I did, which was sorrowful, was done in a funeral home just down from the church. And there were several funerals, and I remember they took me to a room and asked me to sit there. I'd already met with the family, so I knew who they were. I'd met with them and etc. And when I walked into the room, it was a long, kind of narrow room. And I couldn't find the family. And I thought, oh no, they brought me to the wrong funeral. And so I went and I sat down up front on the platform because I was going to be carrying the whole service. And I couldn't find the family. And I was sitting there sweating, where is the family? But I recognized some elderly women had come from the church. So I knew I was in the right place. So I began to read some literature that was helpful from the Bible. And that's when I found out where the family was. There's usually some have side rooms for the family. This had it right behind me. And it was kind of a curtain, a light curtain and some beads. So I couldn't really see them and they weren't making any noise. But when I began to read the scripture, they began to wail. Oh, that was a context. So I've had all sorts of strange contexts in giving my speeches. It assumes complex and ongoing process. Communication is not simple. It's very challenging. Think about words. Words have unique origins and words have unique meanings. And then not only that, but over time, words can take on a secondary meaning. And that makes it very complex. And if we don't know the meanings of words, etc., we got to be so careful how we use them. So there's a complex. I can use a word and you could hear me use a word, but you could put it in your context and it have different meaning than what I ever intended it to be. The complexity of communication is overwhelming. It's always ongoing. It's always ongoing. Communication. It assumes irreversibility. I already spoke about that. When said, it's been said. If I ever said to you, and I would not say this to you, if you and I were talking and I said, you're ugly. What a horrible thing to say, and I wouldn't say that. And then I come to you and say, I'm so sorry, I should never have said that. Well, no, I shouldn't have said that. The trouble is I did say it. It's been said, and it hurt you. Because in my eyes, you're ugly. That's terrible to have said that. And so we have to be aware that both the linear and the circular model, we have to be very careful with our choice of words and our choice of thoughts, because once it's been said, it has been said. You cannot reverse it. Now, the speech types in regard to the whole communication family have two factors to it. One, and I'm using the arrow here, one is the artistic here, and the other is the technical here. This side deals with more of the science of public speaking or any communication, and this deals more with the art of communication. And so we have much more technical: TV, film, video, radio, tweet, all that, computer, all that kind of fits over on the technical side. Debate moves away from there a bit. It moves over into this area. And it certainly borrows a lot on the technical side of proper debate, and I've taught debate, okay? but it does have some art. You can see that it's moving towards some artistic factors, which is over here, but it stays on this side more though. We'll talk about this in a moment. And over here you have theater, and you have readers theater, and you have oral interpretation, and these are more of the artistic, and this becomes a little less artistic, which picks up on some of the science more than here. And so you have these different sides of the artistic side here. But then right in the middle, right down the middle, right in here, is this thing called public speaking. It deals with the technical, and this is the science. This is what we're going to be talking about next, over the next while. But then you'd start giving speeches, and you're thinking about the technical side, and you start using the principles of that, and you begin to shape your artistic skills. And not every two people are the same in public speaking, because of our personalities, because of our genders, because of our life experiences, because of our family background, because of our education, etc. It gets very much impacted. But no matter what, you still need to be always doing the sciences as you shape the artistic side. So those come together and are really important, okay? Now, so please understand that public speaking is in the middle, the science and the art. You need the science. We're going to talk about that in class. You need to shape your artistic side. That takes years of doing. Don't think coming out of this class that you'll be a refined speaker. It takes time to develop that. Don't think that because you taught in school for 1 year that you've learned everything about teaching. You haven't. This is my 39th year. And I want you to know I still am having to develop. I mean, right now, doing the course this way is frustrating for me because I prefer looking at your faces as I'm speaking. Using these PowerPoints, yes, but sharing and having you give your speeches in class, that's so much more what I've learned in this year I've had to deal with it. I accept it, but I much more prefer the idea of being in the classroom. But I'm learning how to have to do this to some degree here. I'm not doing this as comfortably as I would in the classroom. It's much more different for me there. But again, in public speaking, you're always growing and developing. When you become a parent, this is just true of life. When you become a parent, you are, some reason my mouse, oops, didn't mean to do that. You are, as a parent, you have to learn the technical, and then you take all that's involved in how to be a proper parent and become artistic in developing it. Not staying way over here, not staying way over here, but finding that balance in public, in raising a child. So life is so much about that, not just public speaking. Now, let's talk about the elements that are in public speaking that are important, that we need to be aware of, okay? There are 7 of them that I want to talk about. They're all incredibly important in their own unique way, but they're all important. The first is the source. It's the sender. It's the person who's speaking. It's the person who makes a decision to communicate. So in interpersonal relationship, if you have a friend, at some point with your friend, one of you initiated saying, "Hi, how are you? My name is, are you in this class? Oh, I'm in this class." And then you begin to build a bit of a relationship. Well, how did you do that? You started with this, you, the sender, saying, "Hi, my name is, and I'm in this class too." Something like that, whatever it is. Well, in public speaking, the sender is the person who's the speaker. It's the person who's made the decision or been asked, and they made a decision to say yes, they'd be willing to speak, and they make the decision to communicate. And so they communicate some thoughts with people. Okay. So we have the source. And in this course, we're going to study about the source, but we're all and sender. We're also going to give you opportunities to give your speeches. And yes, you have to do them online and send them. But you know, and by the way, let me just stop here to say something about your speech, what you're doing next week. You're in a room, you're sitting there saying, man, how do I make this feel like I have somebody here? Well, first of all, my suggestion is you set up the room in such a way that you're able to be back from the recording machine you use, the iPhone. Set it up, check it out, make sure it works out really well. Set it all up. Like I'm looking towards where I spoke here. And so set it up here, because I had mine set up here. I had a table here and everything with my iPhone set up. So, and I checked it to make sure it was set just the right level. And then I used a ironing board, which is actually hanging in behind the wall of the next room over here. And I set it up and I had a little slight blanket over it to cover it. And then I used some pillows so that I could create a slanted, so I could create like a podium sort of thing, so I could put my notes on that would sit like, you know, like this, so I could see them. Now, I don't have an audience, it's just me. So what did I do? Maybe I told you. I created an audience and I had the audience sitting up. Oh, the fact is, I may have shared this with you because I actually have one of them here. I have this guy here who's actually belongs up there. I've got two giraffes, heavy giraffes over there. I've got another sailor sitting over there. And I got a couple of faces that I've used. And I set them up so I'm looking at something that represents people. That really helped me. So I have that man sitting here right now. He should actually go back to where he belongs. So you have something to look at that are people. I would suggest you do that because guess what? They become your receiver. Now, these are not live, but then, you know, you're having to do it this way, do it that way. Get something that you're looking at and have them spread out a bit so that you're like, you know, wider so that your eyes kind of look like this. Don't just have them look straight in front of you. So you always just look at one, but a few of them. And if you can't find that, get some paper and draw some stick people, some women with a little bit long hair and some guys with brush cuts or whatever cuts, couple eyes and nose, you know, smiley face, whatever. You might even put one with a grumpy face because sometimes you get those in the audiences you have. Whatever that's going to do, that's going to help you focus in on your your temporary printed out audience. So the receiver are the person or persons who receives and perceives the message sent by you, the sender. So you, the sender, are sending a message to the receiver, and the receiver is that person. And what do? They are receiving. So if I say to you in a speech, it's very important for you to brush your teeth every day, at least twice a day. Take this seriously. And you decide to do that. By the way, I had a class of taking public speaking. They're preparing for the master's degree, and everybody in the room, well, almost everybody in the room were doctors of dentistry. And so she gave a speech on the importance of brushing teeth, and she gave research to prove her point. Okay, and I received that fund. I was very impressed by the speech. Okay, I was the receiver, as the others were, but also this word perceiver. We're going to look at this, perceives. To me, this word here and what this means, later we'll look at this when we talk about the issue of ethos, E-T-H-O-S, we'll look at that. I believe that that's the single most important thing in regard to public speaking is the perception. The perception the audience has of you as a speaker. I think that's the single most important issue in public speaking. And we're going to look at 6 factors really important to the issue of perception, okay? But these elements are important. You've got to have the sender, the source, the person who is speaking. You've got to have the person or persons who are the ones taking in the speech. They're the receivers. And they not only receive it, but they're perceiving it. You know as well as I do that we perceive people. We're creating evaluations of people when we meet somebody, we're creating an evaluation of a person, etc. That goes on all the time. One of the things I learned in teaching over the almost 39 years now, is that when the first time I walk into a classroom, the students are fairly easy. It's not hard for them to identify I'm likely the teacher, because now, especially because I got gray hair, white hair, actually, forget the gray. I'm pretty well white, so I'm older looking. And I walk up and I go behind the front table, the front of the room, and that confirms that I'm in charge. And I pull out my laptop computer, which is just sitting here behind me, and I have all my PowerPoints on a stick and also in the computer, and I'm hooking it up. And sometimes I look up and I smile at students and say, hi. This is when I first come in, their first exposure to me. And I'm making sure everything's up and working, and they know that I'm getting ready, and I know something's happening while this is going on. They are sizing me up. They are creating impressions of me. They are perceiving me in that moment. I'm aware of it. You should be aware when you stand in front of an audience, your audience is receiving and perceiving at the same time. You, as you're speaking, be aware of it. That's really kind of important. Just trying to get my computer just stacked up here a bit. There we are. The third one is the message. It's that which involves the ideas, the attitudes, and the values of the speaker as expressed verbally and non-verbally. This is really important for you to remember, not just in this class, but at all times. If you make a presentation in another classroom, when we're back together in the classroom, if you're making a presentation in another class, or if you're making a presentation at a wedding or at a funeral or another place that you're asked to make a presentation, never forget this. There's a few things you should never forget. One, okay, as the source, as the sender, your speech is not about, I mean, you can be about topics about you. I don't mean that, but it's not about you. You know what it's about? Your receiver. You are here as a servant leader for your receivers, the audience. And you, the sender, you are also the message. Your audience, everything about you. When you walk up to give your speech, people are already creating an impression of you. When you give your speech, how you handle everything that relates to the speech. When you go to sit down after the speech, you are leaving an impression. It is a message. And you need to be aware of that. The message is that which involves the ideas, attitudes of the sender, and the values of you, the sender, as expressed verbally and non-verbally. So if you get up front of your audience and you walk up and you kind of waddle up and you kind of nonchalantly begin to walk up, your audience is creating an image of you regarding that. Be aware of that. Then be aware that as you're speaking, they're watching you. And then when you go to sit down, when it's over, how you walk back to your place where you're sitting down. Your audience, you're the message. Everything about you, they're reading it. If you're ever a guest speaker at an organization, be aware before, during, and right after, and then later after, your audience are developing an impression of you. So after someone comes up to talk to you, how you handle them, how you treat them, how you smile at them, how you look into their eyes, how you listen, how you give them time in answering a question that they're asking in light of what you spoke on. That is very important because it's all part of the message. Be aware of that. The channel. The channel, it's the means of transmitting the oral message. Is it face-to-face? Is it media? Is it Zoom? How is this done? So the channel is really important. Do you know one thing that's really challenging for me? I am speaking into that camera just above my computer, reading my notes, which are here, assuming, and I can see that you are here because I can see all your names still written down. But who's to know that all of you didn't go to the washroom at the same time, and I'm speaking into a camera and nobody's listening. Okay. And so that's very troubling for me. I have to do it. I accept that. But I don't get that feedback, the nonverbal feedback at all. And I have to assume a lot. And so that face-to-face is powerful in public speaking. And you need to be aware that as you're speaking, people are reading you, and you, the speaker, you begin to read your audience. So whatever channel you're using, be aware, whether it be live or whether it be oral over a microphone only and you don't see the audience, or whether it be in media like Zoom or whatever else. Those channels are all critical to understand. They are a part of communication. The next one, number 5, the barriers. Those are the factors that interrupt the communication process and potentially causes incorrect meaning to be accepted. There's always barriers. Like I said, I have the barrier of not visually seeing you. There are other barriers that can interrupt the communication process and cause incorrect meaning to be accepted. And you need to think about all the potential barriers that you're dealing with in a classroom setting. The barriers of technology, the barriers of attitudes of bias against you or for you as a speaker, the barriers you might have towards your audience. You need to really think through the potential barriers. A person falling asleep in the room is a barrier. People getting up and walking around as you're speaking can be a barrier, can be very disruptive. You need to always be aware of all those barriers, and somehow you have to work through them as you're speaking. Number 6, the feedback. This is the nonverbal reactions and responses given by the receiver as perceived by the source or sender. In other words, as you're standing in front of an audience, you begin to be able to read your audience. What sort of feedback are you getting? Are they moving forward in the chair? Are they yawning at you? Are they looking at you glassy-eyed? Are they energized or not energized? What's the feedback that you're getting? I spoke, and I'll talk about this later, at a camp. It was a youth group of a church, and asked me to come speak. And I spoke on Sunday night, then twice on Monday morning and evening, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that was one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's 10 plus Sunday night. That's 11 talks. I had 11 talks. And the nonverbal feedback that I got for most of the first part of the week was so painful for me. I really never ever thought I wanted to talk to another teenager the rest of my life. It was so negative, but something happened on the Thursday night that changed things around and made a big difference. And the feedback was radically different from all on Friday morning and Friday night talk. My last two talks were absolutely fabulous talks, but I'll talk about that later. But the feedback, the reactions were so painful for me, and I couldn't leave. I had to do it, but I got through it. And then on the Friday, it was great based on something that happened on the Thursday night. The situation, the last one, is all the elements that contribute to the dynamic moment in which a message is being given and received. Sorry about that. I should have taken it. Hopefully Joanne gets it. So it's all the elements that contribute to the dynamic moment in which a message is being given and received. Okay, it's room, noise, emotional climate, purpose for the speech. All these dynamics together create a situation. I've had situations where it was fantastic in speaking. I've had other situations where it was painful in speaking, and I had to learn how to deal with those situations and all of them. And so will you in public speaking. It's part of the challenge of being a public speaker, but really important to learn how to do this. Listen, if you learn public speaking, you have power. You impact people's lives in a powerful, significant way. Now, I have one last part to deal with. It's your first speech. It's a speech that you're going to be doing and getting to me in a week's time, okay? And so you have to, read it, the syllabus. I think it was on page 5. It is on page 5, halfway down. It's called the personal story speech that you have to give, okay? It's a 3 to 4 minute speech. It's on you. Your research is you. You have to talk about something unique about yourself and then illustrate with stories, okay? I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. In fact, I'm doing this. I think I mentioned I got this gift from my daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren. And this past, I get a question every week, and then I write it, and then over 50 weeks, and then they'll bind all these stories together, and then I'll buy a few, give each to my grandchildren a story, and they'll have something about me, about things like this last week, I had to talk about my favorite toys. And I talked about 5 toys and why they were important to me as a kid. Now I have literally got it this week, and I have to talk about my parents and my grandparents, my grandparents on my dad's side, my grandparents on my mom's side. I never knew my grandfather on my mom's side. He died when she was 12 years old, but I only know him from what my mom's shared. So I can talk about the 3 grandchildren. What am I saying? I literally tell a story. So that's what you're doing. What about you? Okay, there's something about you, a characteristic about you, and then you illustrate it.
Hi, Professor. Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Is that the story identify to me or
yes.
something important?
Yeah, okay. What you're doing is you're talking about yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so a characteristic about yourself and then a story that illustrates that. For instance, maybe you are a very determined person, Tom. Maybe you're a person that you set a goal and you always reach it. Let's just say that's it. I have no idea. But you probably have a couple stories that really demonstrates that you are a person that sets a goal and you reach it. And there are 2 or 3 reasons you reach it. And here they are. And now here's a story that demonstrates that. That's what you're doing. That's a basic, whatever your story is. And we all have stories, every one of us. And it's fascinating for me to listen to your speeches and listen to a person say, here's my story. I had a student, I may have said this years ago, who gave a story about a characteristic of him. He said, I am very boring. And we all laughed. We were in class with him. And he told the story I mean, he told us and the factors that led him to the conclusion he's a very boring person. And he then told a couple stories that illustrated that. But what was funny about this was that we were so involved listening to his speech, and we were laughing not at him, but with him telling his story. He was actually anything but boring. It was quite entertaining. Anyways, that's what the speech is about. It's the first speech, and it's due next week. So enjoy this. Listen, now you need to put it together well. Okay, don't get me wrong. I have to grade it, but this is you. Tell your story, a story, characteristic about your story. Excuse me, characteristic about you, and a story. And you find like I don't have a lot to say. Well, then use a couple of characteristics of yourself and a story for each one. But again, it's only a 3 to 4 minute speech. Okay, so listen to what I've got to say here. We're almost done. This is the last part. Okay. Have a positive attitude about yourself. You are actually more interesting than you're giving yourself credit in some cases. Have a positive attitude and say, you know what? I actually have had an interesting life, and there's a couple of things about me that I find interesting. And I'm going to share one or both of them. 2, select your focus. It's about you. I've got a few about me that I think is interesting. Okay. One of the key words given to me years ago, there's 2 given to me. One was from a woman in the church that I was involved in for 7 years. And she said, Curtis, you are an overcomer. Then my wife and I were talking, and she said, oh, the one word, if I were to choose one word about you, it would be enthusiasm. I'm enthusiastic. Doesn't mean on everything, but I'm enthusiastic. And I could tell you stories about those. Well, what about you? How are you overcomer? For instance, I think I've mentioned I had brain damage done to me when I was a 7-year-old in grade 2. Doctor said I will never amount to much academically because my cognition in my brain has been significantly, really seriously damaged. But just last semester, I found out from a nurse in one of my classes who's working on her Bachelor of Arts degree in leadership, working on a master's degree at the same time. And she's married, a nurse, and has 3 children, has a business, and she wants to go on and work on a doctoral degree after. Very determined woman. And she told me that she works in the area related to brain damage. She said, let me tell you what you did. And I kind of half knew it, but didn't know it like she would. And she said, there's this thing called elasticity in the brain. There's a capacity for the brain to create new avenues for neurons to travel with messages. And she said, you did this without anybody helping you. And you created other parts of the brain to do what the damaged part of the brain used to do better. And so I've been able to do it, but I do things differently just because of that reality. That's a focus about me. I could talk about that. I won't talk anymore about that. But select your focus. It has to be as dynamic as what I said. Organize your speech. You should have a short introduction. Okay? You don't need to say, hi, my name is Curtis, and I'm here to talk about, you don't need to do that. Just go into your speech. You can do it by saying, responsibility that I have is to share something, 1 or 2 things that is really a focus of me and a story that illustrates it. I want to do that so that you will know me better. Something like that. The body of the speech should have that 1 thing or 2 things about yourself and a story that supports that. And by the way, 3 to 4 minutes is not a long speech. It's not a long speech. Get it organized. And then you have a short conclusion. And we'll be talking about what an introduction is and what a conclusion is. We'll get into that more. Okay? Develop the language that is familiar to you and to clarifies for your audience. So if you use a unique word in your speech, make sure that I will understand it. And how do you do that? The context in which it's said, your audience will understand. Oh, by the way, you have these PowerPoints, you can go look this up at the first PowerPoint of the course. You'll find all this at the end. Come on. Okay, whoops. Okay, here we are. Okay, practice your speech. Physically, get your speech done. Don't try to record right away. Practice it. Get comfortable with it. Then mentally practice. In your mind, think about the speech. Lying in bed before you go to sleep, unless you're one of these people that put your head on the pillow and you go to sleep. I don't. I think first. So it may not be the best place, but mentally sit there somewhere and just think through your speech. See yourself walking up to the podium, not just in this class, but I'm talking about wherever you speak. See yourself looking at the audience. In this case, your makeshift audience, that man, the sailor man that I have is part of my audience. Don't stare them down, but just do a quick glance. See yourself mentally giving your first line. Your first sentence is critical. Your first 17 to 21 seconds is the time frame in which people make a decision whether they plan to keep listening to you. That's how little time you have. See yourself dealing with the unexpected. It may not happen, but you know, the unexpected thing could happen. Maybe as you're giving your speech, somebody walks in. Okay, don't stop and say, oh, excuse me, get out of here. Then come back and start giving your speech. Try to give the person a signal or just keep speaking during the time, and hopefully they understand that they should walk out. Whatever it is, if you may not have any expected things, but you know, just be aware that they can happen. See yourself giving the illustration and your story. So you know what you see yourself telling this significant thing about you. See yourself telling the story how this happened. And then see yourself saying, here's something that really helped me become better because of this experience. Whatever that is, you have to think that through. Okay. Oh, come on. Speak. See yourself giving the introduction and the conclusion. Go over it. Practice the introduction. Practice the conclusion. Make sure you have an introduction and a conclusion. Don't just say, well, I think I've said enough. Goodbye. That's not a conclusion. Think about a conclusion. See yourself in transition. So now you've told yourself, you've shared, for me, I'm sharing something that's very intimate that happened to me as a 7-year-old. Not many people know the story, but I share it with you so that you can see you can be an overcomer. The story I'm sharing with you is a time when I had brain damage. I fell out of a top bunk bed on my head on a cement floor, ended up in the hospital for about a week and a half in a relatively dark room, not allowed to move from my bed for the whole time. And talk about it. Just you don't go into the whole story. And say, in the midst of this, I didn't hear about this, but my parents were told that I would never be able to think properly. I would have trouble with my brain, my cognition, my processing of thinking. But some things happened. And I want to share a story of the turning point that changed me radically from a person who knew something wasn't right and I wasn't doing well, and literally got the strap on my hands by a principal in school in front of all my fellow students on 2 occasions, 4 times on each hand with a belt, trying to motivate me when all he did with that little 12-year-old boy was destroy him. And how my second year in grade 7, halfway through the year, I ended up in another school with a different principal who sat down with me and he asked me a question that was really a statement. And that was the moment my life was radically changed. It took time, but I began to work through not doing well in school and beginning to turn the corner. And it was at that time I began using other parts of my brain, didn't know I was doing that, to begin to be successful. And today I have a Doctor of Education degree. Okay, so use that transition, whatever that is. See yourself giving the whole story, the whole speech, your point and your story, whatever that is. Just practice it in your mind. Then, of course, record it. See yourself being dynamic, being more than what you really are. Okay, those things are important. Practice it, then of course record it, then send it to me. I have one more state. Okay, see yourself being dynamic, and then seeing yourself walk back to the desk after. All those things are important in practicing your speech. Lastly, here's the last thing. This is it. I'm done with the PowerPoints and I'm done. We're done. Get the proper rest and food before the speech. Even if you're doing it online, I mean, if you're doing it in a room by yourself, make sure you have the energy. Food and rest equals energy. So I'm looking forward to your speeches. If you have additional questions, you are most certainly open. I'll take your emails, send me an email, say, I have a question. Is this idea about myself good? Is this a good illustration, or is this a good story that helps demonstrate my point about me? And I'll give you feedback. You're free to do that. I'll be home, I'll be waiting, I'll be available. So be sure to do that. Now I'm available during the week. Your speech is due next Friday. Okay, so if you have questions, be sure to send me emails and I'll be sure to work on answering your questions. I'm done. Have a good week, and we will see you, not see you in person, I mean, in like this, but I'll see you by watching your speeches. Okay? That's what I'm looking forward to. See you then.
So
Have a good
See
week.
you.
See you. Bye.
wait,
Bye.
can I ask a question right now? Hello?
Hello.
Hi, it's just you
Is
said
this, is this Tiana?
yes, it's Tiana.
Okay. Yes, Tiana.
You have to give the speech in front of the wall, like, and back to the table, back to the chairs after that.
Oh, yeah. Are you saying after you've given your speech, do you walk away?
No, it's just in your bullet points you said walk back to the desk at the end of the.
Yeah. Well, obviously you can't. I'm thinking. Okay, after you're finished regarding, because you're recording it. After you're finished,
Mhm.
just walk away out of the sight of the camera. Go around to turn it off.
Oh, okay.
Or if you have a person that's recording it for you,
Mhm.
they'll just turn it off. Just give them a few seconds to turn it off.
Oh,
The idea is showing some graciousness, being graceful how you end it. Like when you're finished your speech, you don't just go, "Whew, done, good, where's that button? Oh yeah, there it is, hit it." That takes away from your speech. So when you finish your speech, let's say you're standing behind a makeshift, like an ironing board or something, whatever you're using, just walk around, come around and hit the button off on your phone or whatever you're using to record. That's all you have to do.
okay. So do we have to record our whole body or just like top of the body?
Well, you know what? If you want to, like, I don't know if you can see me, but if the camera right now, if you're seeing me, you're probably seeing about from my head, my neck, and my chest and my hands.
Yes.
Want to do that? That's fine. Standing up just gives you a little bit more freedom. You just have to set up the room differently. The reason I don't do it teaching is that it's 3 hours of doing this where I can't really move because the camera's right here. And so it's easier for me to do that because I'm recording this at the same time.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help you or not?
Yeah, so like do I have to like show my whole body, like my legs, my shoes, or just top of the body?
Like you can, well, no, you don't have to show the whole body, but if you show from the head, the shoulders down to at least the waist, that's fine.
Do we have to dress business formal or
No, okay, good. Those are great questions, by the way. I wish I'd let you guys ask questions. What you need to do regarding this is you need to, I'm just doing this here. Okay. Okay, I gotta just see if I did something wrong. I hope okay, there we are. Okay, sorry, just give me a second here. I just want to stop this right now. Okay.